Hey everyone, welcome to my channel, Mukesh's Tech Space. If you are new here, I post video tutorials on AWS, Lightsail, Azure, and WordPress hosting, and many other easy to set up and use web hosting tools and services. I also post video tutorials on WordPress tips and tricks, mostly for the beginning developer. So if you are interested in this type of content, please consider subscribing to my channel. Today I'll walk you through setting up a basic vanilla WordPress site using a LAMP stack. For those of you that don't know, LAMP stands for Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. It's the most common configuration for applications like WordPress. On this channel, I've done video tutorials on setting up multi-instance WordPress sites using Server Pilot, Run Cloud, which are both cloud web host management services. Also, we've done video tutorials on setting up Plex as well as cPanel WHM with their Lightsail blueprints. All of these provide ways on setting up a multi-site WordPress instance on a single Lightsail server. So today I'll walk you through a manual way of setting up a WordPress or actually any PHP application using a LAMP stack. This will be useful for those that don't want the overhead of installing and maintaining a web host management software. They just want to be able to create more multiple WordPress sites using a command line tools. So that's what we'll walk through now. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so to get started, first we'll do is create our instance. So in your Lightsail dashboard, click on Create Instance. In our instance image, we'll select Linux, Unix, and then in the blueprint, we'll select LAMP. This is a bitnami-based LAMP stack configuration, by the way. We'll come down here, pick your instance plan, give your instance a name, and click Create Instance. So while that's happening, let's go ahead and create our static IP address. And then with the static IP address, let's set up the DNS records for our first website. So I won't show you how to create DNS records. You can look up the process for your specific DNS registration system. But basically, we're going to create two A records, one for the www entry and one for just the root entry. In our example here, I'm going to use mukesh.me as my sample domain. So I will create A records for www.mukesh.me and just mukesh.me, both pointing to this IP address. So go ahead and take care of that with the registration system that you currently have. What we'll do next is attach the IP address to our LAMP instance. Okay, we have that taken care of. Next, what we'll do is set up the SSH access. So typically, what you could do is click on this to access the console. So if you click on that, the web-based SSH console shows up, but I won't do that this time. I will show you how to set up your own SSH client to access your server. So what we'll do is go to Account, click on Account, click on SSH keys, and then you'll have these options for the regions where you've set up your AWS services. So for me, it's Ohio and Virginia. Since this server was set up in Virginia, US East 1, I will download these keys. So go ahead and download those. Then open up your SSH client. And in my case, I'm using Bitvise SSH client, and you can use any of those, but the instructions I'll show you are specific to this, and you'll have to find similar instructions for the SSH client that you intend to use. So in the client, let's go ahead and set up our key manager. Click on Import, and then I downloaded mine in my downloads directory, I believe, right here. Go ahead and import that. Then our host is this IP address. Username will be bitnami, since that's the flavor of our LAMP stack. Bitnami has a username. And then we'll pick public key, pick our key that we just selected or we just installed. And a couple of things I will do here under terminal, disable beeping, and go ahead and log in. And there we go. The reason I like Bitvise SSH Client, it has both a file manager, so I can upload files through this SFTP feature, and I also have access to the terminal. So that's the reason I like Bitvise. You can use whatever flavor of SSH Client. PuTTY is a popular one, however, that's only SSH. Okay, so the next option is, or the next step is, now we're going to start setting up our WordPress website. Run these commands. I'm going to start running these commands and I'll explain what each of them do. I will have links to all the commands and instructions in the post on my website, webhostingforbeginners.net, so you can go check it out there. So the first command, what we'll do, and just to see where we are inside the home bitnami folder. We'll run this command, which is wget and then the latest version of WordPress from the wordpress.org website. And we are storing that in the local folder here. So once you have it downloaded, you'll see there's a latest.zip. The next command we'll do is unzip this the WordPress file. We'll unzip it in /opt/bitnami. This is the directory where all of your WordPress sites will be stored under. So we'll go ahead and run this command. This is unzipping the entire WordPress website code, the actual application, in a folder called WordPress within the opt bitnami location. So the next thing we'll do is rename that folder, WordPress folder, with what I'm doing here is the name of the website. So I'm going to rename WordPress to mukesh.me, since that's our domain we're using for the website. The next command will be to give that folder, that directory, proper permissions and global right permissions. Okay, perfect. And the next command will be to create our virtual host VHOST configuration files for Apache. So we're going to create two files. The first one is our VHOST entry for the HTTP, the HTTP port, and we'll copy this configuration code. So it's virtual host listening on port 80, our server name, server alias. So we have www.mukesh.me also pointing to this website. Our document root, which is where we just unzipped WordPress, and our directory and gave it the necessary permissions to work correctly. So once you have this, save this off. And now we're going to create a configuration file for HTTPS as well. So go ahead and run this command. This will create a file, insert the configuration for HTTPS. Again, the same thing, server name, server alias, and then the document root and directory. And then these are the added items for SSL certificate. So one thing, obviously you'll know that rename mukesh.me everywhere in this code with your domain name. Okay, so we have our configuration done. We'll restart our Apache Webs instance. And then we have our files, we have our website configuration done. The next thing we'll do is create a MySQL database. Now, part of our LAMP stack was the M, which is MySQL. So the database is already installed. we just need to create a WordPress database. So to do that, we'll log into MySQL. The stack already has MySQL installed under the username root, and the password is, so before I run that, let's get the password. The password is actually stored in a file called bitnami application password. So this is the password that will be used for the MySQL access. So now we can run sudo mysql -u root -p and then paste that password, and now you're in the MySQL CLI. Let's create our database by running this command, create database wpdb. That's what I'm going to name my database. You can name your WordPress database whatever you'd like. And then we will create a user to give access to that database. So I'll run this create user command. We'll use a username called WP user. Again, you can switch that to whatever you would like. And then the password. And I just created a strong password, and we will hit enter here. And now we need to grant this user access to our database. So we will run this command. And that gives us all the privileges on WPDB for this user. Again, switch those out to the database and usernames that you would have used. So we're done with the MySQL part. Let's exit out of that. And now what we'll do is set up our SSL certificate. Since this is a Bitnami configuration, Bitnami has a Let's Encrypt certification generation tool. So we'll run that. So it's sudo, and then the script is installed in opt bitnami bn cert-tool. Okay, it says an updated version is available. So let's go ahead and update that. And we'll have to run it again after it has been updated. So the first thing we'll need to provide it is the list of domains that we want SSL certificates generated for. So we'll put mukesh.me and www.mukesh.me. And now it's going to ask if you want to set up HTTP to HTTPS redirection. I'm going to say no here, and I'll say no to the next two commands as well, or next two prompts, mostly because we can handle these redirections in our htaccess file or inside our WordPress configuration layer. And I'd like to keep it that way because one of the issues that I've seen and heard about is if you turn this on, the redirection to HTTP to HTTPS, and then there's another redirection that can get configured at the Apache configuration level. If you intend to put the Lightsail CDN in front of this, then you have to go back and modify and remove those redirections when you do that. So instead of dealing with the configuration files at that time, I'm just going to not do any redirection at this point, and then we can do redirections in our WordPress layer if we need to. So I'm going to say no to this. Enable non-dub-dub to dub-dub-dub redirection, we'll say no, and then we'll say no here as well. And then the next is just confirming all the steps that it's going to be performing. We'll say yes, I agree. And then we'll provide it an email address. And then do you agree to the subscriber agreement? So you can find the agreement right here. There's a PDF link. Agree to that. And then it's going to start performing the certificate generation and install that for our website. Here we go. And that's done. Let's hit enter to exit out of that tool. You should be able to access your website using the domain name that you just configured. So we'll go up to our browser and we'll type in mukesh.me. And if I do that, I should get the WordPress installation screen, which I do right here. And we'll go ahead and configure our database. So our database was WPDB in my instance. WP user was the username that we set up. Password was that long string. So let me grab that. And then it's localhost and then your table prefix. You can rename your table prefix. I did a video recently about WordPress tips on security. It's a mixed bag whether this is really a secure step to help prevent WordPress attacks. Some people say it is, some people say it's good to add it. I like to go ahead and add it, but another reason to do this is so that if you intend to use the same database for multiple WordPress sites, you can give each of your websites a different table prefix. So we can do that for, if nothing else, that reason. And if there's a security benefit, that's all the better, right? So let's go ahead and give this a name of MME. So mukesh.me, put an underscore at the end, and hit submit. And it's going to run the installation, create all our tables, and present us with this screen. Give our site a title, mukesh.me. And we'll install WordPress. And there we go. So our WordPress site is installed. It's on a HTTP, as you can see. It's on this domain. Now, keep in mind, we didn't do the redirections, so you can actually have both of these working. Mine is redirecting. It's probably because my browser is doing that, but both www and mukesh.me should be both loading the same site. Now within WordPress, you can install some plugins, or you can turn on redirects using rewrite module within htaccess. That's how you install a WordPress site on a LAMP-based stack. The reason to do this was to be able to create multiple WordPress sites on the same instance instead of using the WordPress blueprint in Lightsail. So to install a second WordPress site, you would basically run through all the similar commands for your whatever domain that you want a different WordPress site for. So let's run through that real quick. So I'm going to run through majority of those commands that I just ran, and I'll show you how that works. So we first went and retrieved the latest WordPress version. You can do that if you want, if you're installing this after a while. But since I just downloaded the latest WordPress package, I'm not going to run that command. But instead, I'm going to just unzip the file that we already have. So if you do an ls on here, I'll see that my latest WordPress installation zip is right here. So I'll just unzip that. And since it's, again, going to create the WordPress folder and then have all our files within that, we're going to rename the WordPress folder. We're going to rename it to our website. So in my case here, I'm going to rename WordPress to, let's do wp.mukesh.me. So maybe I want another WordPress site for wp.mukesh.me. So we'll use that. And then we'll give it the permissions. So again, here we'll have to make sure we put wp dot in front of all of our commands. And then finally, we'll create our configuration files for Apache. And in here, we will also rename this to wp dot save that. We'll run the second command for HTTPS configuration. Go from the top, wp dot. Now, you typically won't have a www.wp.mukesh.me. You typically don't have that kind of a domain. So you could really skip the server alias part if you don't need it, if you're using a subdomain like this. All right, so we save that. If we did all of that correctly, we should be able to restart Apache without any issues. And there we go, Apache is restarted. So now next, you have two options. You can leave the database that we already have the same, or you can create a brand new database. In our scenario here, I'll leave it as is. I'll just create a new table prefix for this new site under the existing database. So we don't have to create the database commands, but you would run those same commands, log into MySQL, create a database, create a user, and then grant that user permissions to that database if you want to create separate databases. Next, we will create our certificates for this site. Actually, I did not enter the DNS record, so let me go ahead and do that real quick. Okay, I've done that. Now let's run our tool. Typically, you want to do that ahead of time because it takes some time for the DNS propagation, and to generate Let's Encrypt certificates, your domains should be pointing to that IP address for Let's Encrypt to validate your domain. So let's try and see what happens. I just did it, so I'm not sure if it's going to find them. So let's do wp.me and www.wp. Okay, looks like it did find them. So we'll again say no to all these redirection prompts. Yes, I agree. Okay, so we have everything done. So let's hit enter. Now we should be able to load up this new site with HTTPS, and it should give us the WordPress installation. So let's go ahead and click go. The database name was WPDB. Our username is the same. Password is that long password that I had. Localhost. And this is where we can change the prefix for our website under the same database. So for this one, we'll say WPM. Username, copy that, and then email. Okay, so now if you go here, you'll see that this is another one. Our certificate is valid. And so we have both of sites running under one Lightsail instance. If you don't want the overhead of managing a web host management service, you can go this route. All the commands that we ran, you can put those in a shell script or a PowerShell script if you're like Windows, and run this automatically. Give it, create your script so it can prompt you with all of these input parameters and then run this by yourself. And that way your server does not need to have a cPanel with WHM kind of setup. It doesn't need Plex or any other overhead that takes up resources part of your server. But this is another route where you can create websites using nothing but command line tools. And so your server is very slim. It's not running any extra items that it doesn't need to. So this would be useful in that situation. I will post all of these commands on the website, webhostingforbeginners.net. That's the companion website I created where I can elaborate a little bit more on the tutorials that we walk through here. So there will be a post for each video, and you can go back and review other videos and follow along those steps. As I mentioned in the beginning, we've done video tutorials on setting up this type of server with RunCloud, Server Pilot, WHM cPanel, Plex. I've also done a Docker-based web host management tool called CapRover. And I've also done a WordPress cluster setup from scratch. So you can go check those out. And those are just another way of setting up WordPress easily. Hope you found this useful. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below. I'll try my best to answer them. Please share this video out to others. Subscribe to my channel so we can get some channel growth. And until the next video, take care.